Have you heard the warnings? I've heard the warnings. I've been hearing advertisements even on the radio from the city of Montreal warning tenants to carefully consider moving this year due to record rent hikes and a tight rental market. The warning is this, if you're going to move, make sure you've got another place before you tell your landlord that you're not going to renew. Lease renewals are coming up, and landlords must send rent increase notices by March 31st. Tenants have 1 month to respond. So the timing now, this is the right time to talk about this, right? We got to talk about it now so you don't end up in a couple of months finding yourselves in a bad position. Juliana Duholke joins us in studio here, housing lawyer. Juliana, thank you so much for coming in studio.
Yeah, my pleasure.
What are you seeing here? I mean, I hear the city of Montreal with these warnings. I imagine that these are warnings that are probably pretty important right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have a lot of tenants coming in saying, I absolutely can't afford this rent increase. I am going to refuse it or just move out, give up my lease. But I really warn them against that unless they have another option set up, because as much as I totally understand they don't want to pay these huge increases, the reality is they could be stuck with an even higher rent if they give up their current lease.
That's right. So, there's some stability, even if we're going to have these record increases, there's some stability there to the rent. And if you go onto the open market, well, you're at the whims of what that market is showing right now.
Exactly.
So what's your advice then to tenants? Give me the steps that a tenant needs to be thinking of here as the landlords send out these renewal notices.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is hard because the guidelines are so high. But that being said, I think a lot of people forget they are able to negotiate with their landlord. Their landlord isn't obligated to follow these guidelines. They can do a lower increase. Obviously, the motivation isn't necessarily there for a lot of landlords, but it depends on your relationship with your landlord. Some of my tenants have a very good relationship. If you've been there a long time, the landlord might be willing to hear that, okay, you need a lower rent increase, but you're willing to agree to the same rent increase next year. You can agree in advance. So there are options as far as thinking about negotiating with your landlord as far as repairs they might want to do as well. Maybe they have something on the horizon where you can agree on timing. Maybe they want to do a big renovation and you want to go on vacation. So if you're willing to be out of the house for a month in the summer, they're going to be really happy with that and they're willing to decrease your rent increase this year. So negotiation is an option that I think a lot of people forget about, but I completely understand that a lot of people are in a position where they can't negotiate. So in those situations, I ask people to always follow up with their landlords, get the calculation, check the receipts, check the numbers. A lot of landlords fill out those forms incorrectly, either because they just don't understand them or on purpose in kind of a bad faith move. But check the numbers, do the math yourself. It's really easy online to use the TAL, the Tribunal Administratif de Logement, their calculation form. You can fill it out yourself online. So really try to play around with numbers and do that yourself.
Well, I'll tell you from personal experience, I remember when I was the first time I lived in NDG and I stayed in the same place basically for 10 years. Luckily, I had that relationship with the landlord. And they would always send me the renewal notice. And it was always too high, in my opinion. And I would say, I'll agree to this. And they never said no. So just on if you're going to go to the TAL, right, the tribunal, I imagine a lot of landlords, it's paperwork, it's time loss, that kind of stuff. They're doing a balancing act as well. So I think maybe sometimes we forget that we could be successful in the negotiation.
Absolutely. A lot of landlords, even if they know they could get a higher amount at the TAL, they don't want the headache of going there. Like you said, it's paperwork, it's time, it's annoying for everyone involved. It's a day off work. So they are often willing to negotiate at least a little bit. For them, it's worth the saving of time and hassle.
For you, would it be almost an automatic? You get the renewal notice and it's right away respond with, I'm staying, but I reject right away. And just to start that maybe negotiation process?
Yeah, I mean, definitely let them know that, you're staying, and I would counter pretty immediately with a counter negotiation, because if you just say, I'm staying and I reject, they might immediately say, okay, I'm applying to the TAL. And there you could be stuck with the time of going to the TAL as well as the costs. It's not hugely expensive, but there is a $90 application fee for going to the TAL. And if your landlord gets what they ask for, you end up having to reimburse that $90 application fee.
Okay.
They also might get a higher amount at the TAL. Again, the guidelines this year are unfortunately extremely high. The 5.9 is almost more like a minimum, unfortunately, than an average when I look at the calculations. So it's possible if they're only giving you a 5.9, it's possible, the TAL is going to say, actually, it's a 6.2% increase, 6.5. So that's why I think it's important to, yes, absolutely kind of respond immediately, but get a negotiation started as soon as possible.
We're with Juliana Duholke, a housing lawyer, talking about those renewals that are coming up for leases. Juliana, what are the kind of questions that you're getting as a housing lawyer? What are the questions you are getting right now over and over and over that we should discuss with our listeners?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are wanting to know kind of, can they refuse a rent increase because a landlord has failed to do repairs, or because, their apartment's in disarray. Maybe they have a huge bed bug problem, rat infestation. And the answer to that is no, a short answer at least. It's the rent increase calculation is, yes, it's based on repair work, but just fundamentally it's based on municipal taxes, school taxes, insurance costs. So even if they haven't done one single repair, they could have done, $0 worth of work in your apartment, they still are entitled to that essentially 5.9 increase.
Gotcha. But that person should also be thinking about taking the landlord to the tribunal for all of those issues, right?
Exactly. So unfortunately, it can't all be done in the same claim. Often they don't want to say, okay, I want to decrease the rent at the same time they're increasing it. It's going to have to be a separate application, but they absolutely should file an application sooner rather than later to just get that process started.
Are you seeing renovictions, that kind of thing, that type of pressure that may not be allowed or otherwise? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a lot of clients are getting notices for major work. I would say the more common tactic that at least I've seen is repossession notices. Landlords saying that they're going to move in themselves, which is sometimes the case, but I have seen many, many times when it's kind of just a pressure tactic and a hope that they can get someone else out of there quickly so they can renovate and hike up the rent.
Can you force them to approve it? They say, I'm moving in. How do you, and if so, how do you force them to approve that they're actually going to move in?
Yeah, it is hard, but the good thing about a repossession case is the burden of proof is on the landlord to show that it's in good faith. So that's one where I say definitely contest. There's no kind of downside to contesting that apart from, yes, you'll have to be involved in the TAL process, but you won't be stuck with any fees for contesting it. And the worst case scenario, the repossession is approved and you're still going to be reimbursed your moving expenses. So I always say with a repossession contest, force them to prove it, ask them for evidence, ask them for documents.
Can I ask you just on the things that we're seeing between landlords and tenants and the back and forth? Is there anything else that's like top of mind that our listeners should be, okay, I want to make sure I don't get taken advantage of?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think another big thing is with major work notices, tenants need to know that they can refuse them just because a landlord sends you a notice like, oh, you have to move out for 6 months, I'm going to do all this major work. If it's just cosmetic work, you actually are allowed to say, no, I don't want this update. And yes, you have to let your landlord do like minor repairs, of course, in your apartment for sure. Definitely let them do that. You don't want to get in trouble for refusing those. But if they just say they want to make it, up to date in the taste of today, then refuse it.
Just there was I think it was Law 31, right? Bill 31 that came into effect. It changed a whole bunch of things. Were there any more, because I know it got a lot of flack, this bill.
Yeah.
But were there some protections or some differences? Any recent changes, part of that law that we should be aware of when it comes to this year?
One of them that was positive that's come out was a separate bill than Bill 31. But now, before you could only... People above 70 years old were specially protected from repossessions, and they did lower that this past year to 65. So a lot of people don't necessarily know that, but if you are 65, there's a couple other conditions, but if you're older than 65, you might be fully protected from a repossession, which is important.
Okay, Juliana, listen, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming in studio and sharing your insight. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, anytime.
Juliana Duholke is a housing lawyer.